It's often said that by the time a matter reaches the president's desk, no good choices exist. If there were clean options, cheap, reversible, morally uncomplicated, they would have been resolved long before they reached that level. What arrives at the Oval Office are residual problems, compressed time, stacked risks, and decisions where every available path carries serious costs. That's where we are now. This isn't a conversation about good versus evil. It's about how leaders make decisions when every option violates something they care about, strategically, morally, or historically. Welcome to Threat and Theory, where intelligence meets insight, hosted by a veteran of the U.S. intelligence community. We cut past the headlines to show you the world as it actually unfolds, a place where threats are examined before they're obvious, and theory is used to understand what pressure, power, and intent are really doing beneath the surface. Every episode breaks down complex geopolitics, tradecraft, hidden dynamics, emerging technologies, and the human element behind global events. It's like learning chess for the geopolitical world of today. Discover how intelligence actually shapes the world, not through secrets, but through clarity. You're listening to Threat and Theory. Let's begin. So, Howard, let's start there. What's the decision that's on the president's desks right now?
Well, I'd like to say it's as simple as war versus peace, or even good versus evil, bad versus easy versus hard. It's just not that simple. There are really kind of three paths that the president has to choose from. And the first is where Washington sets objectives and owns the escalation. Second is where the allies, and particularly Israel in this case, inherit that for us, or they take that from us. And in that case, we're talking about the missile problem. Should we not negotiate a peace on that, then that becomes an Israel problem, and they set the terms on that. And then the third one is strategic inaction, and then we accept the cost of doing nothing. And there is an inherent risk in inaction as well.
So people keep asking, is this the moment? And I guess, is it?
Perhaps. It's not that. It's never that simple. And it really depends on if several clocks line up. The first is the capability clock. Do we have the right forces in theater? And then the second would be the regime stress clock. What's going on internally within Iran? Are they willing to compromise, or would that fracture their regime? And that kind of determines whether we're going to have a diplomatic solution or not, or if we're going to have regime change or not, for that matter. And then the third is a sequencing clock. Israel has stated that it reserves the right to strike Iran's missile program should that not be resolved by diplomatic negotiations. And so you have these three clocks, and the last clock matters because delay no longer preserves choice. It might just give that choice over to a third party.
Gotcha.
So this may not be the last chance to strike, but it may be the last chance to decide who gets to make that choice.
Yeah. So you talk about it's the last chance to who gets to decide to make that choice. What does failure look like?
Well, the most dangerous failure isn't always escalation. It's escalation that changes nothing. In other words, if we're going to go into military action, it needs to achieve something. And that goes back to Clausewitz. And that is, war is politics by other means. We conduct war for a specific purpose. That implies that war has a rational purpose. So it means that if we're going to go into war, we are doing it to achieve a political goal. And if we are just dropping bombs, whether it's symbolic or for whatever reason, then there's really no purpose to war. It's just violence. And so if you induce regime fracture, that's one outcome, but you're also inheriting instability, and what we call in our phases that we talk about, that's phase 5. And yet that's that chaotic moment where between regimes, as it were.
Yeah.
And, the Trump administration pounds on the table every chance they get and say, we don't want to do nation building. Well, if you broke it, you own it, right? And so there's that. And then every version of success comes with a bill. And the bill is always due after the applause ends. We see that even in Venezuela now. We took out Maduro, but there's something left. History never ends when the last bomb drops. And so it will be with whatever happens in Iran.
So we can't avoid the moral dimension here, right?
Right. And we shouldn't try. There's a real moral case against us doing this. Let's be clear. First of all, the notion of the U.S. going in and assisting the overthrow of a Shia Muslim state led by the Ayatollah, who's really the most senior Shia religious figure, or the most senior religious figure in Shia Islam, is anathema to a great many people in the Muslim world. Second, there's the sovereignty aspect. Should the U.S. be involved in regime change?
Sure.
And third, there's the delegitimization of the internal opposition. If the United States starts getting involved in what has been, at this point, the internal opposition pushing against the government, do we delegitimize that internal opposition? And so there's that. There are serious concerns. But there's also a moral case for action. Since the revolution led by Khomeini, not Khamenei, Khomeini was the man who overthrew the Shah, the regime as almost as the de facto policy for the last 48 years has been against the United States. They call us the Great Satan, and Israel the Little Satan. And this has led them to embark on a 48-year-long campaign of terror against the United States. It has killed Americans through the process, including American servicemen in Beirut through the bombings there, at Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia, in Iraq through the improvised explosive devices. They've plotted to assassinate President Trump. They're not exactly friendly to the United States, and they're a force for instability in the Middle East. Last month they murdered an estimated 20,000 plus of their own people and maimed tens of thousands more. Think about that. Yeah. Using sniper fire and automatic weapons fire against protesters with aiming at their own people, protesting on the street. They essentially massacred their own people.
Yeah.
And so there's that moral question. So at some point, sovereignty stops functioning as a moral shield against that kind of behavior. So the moral question is no longer whether intervention violates norms, it's whether restraint has become a form of complicity. And so we're kind of at that question mark right now. We're at that inflection point.
So we've talked about the risk of action. What is the risk of no action?
Well, and that's a great question. And I'm going to call out a friend of mine, Fred Turner. He was my partner in crime there on USS Theodore Roosevelt, and we used to sit there out on the ship and kind of shake our heads. because we had watched this all develop through the years as intelligence officers in the United States Navy. While I was serving on the Fifth Fleet staff and later on USS Theodore Roosevelt, we dealt with Iran constantly. Not hypothetically, it was a daily nuisance. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Navy would come out with their small boats, and they deliberately harass the U.S. Navy ships. They'd conduct close passes with their small boats, and they'd fly UAVs close aboard in unsafe manners. They were just they were gangsters on boats, basically. Swarming behavior, whatever. And under the standing rules of engagement at the time, which emphasized maintaining the status quo under almost all costs, we never responded.
Yeah.
Ultimately, not because we couldn't, by the way. It's just it was all about maintaining the status quo. But eventually,
they were looking for a reaction, and you weren't going to be the one to give them the reaction.
That's right. And but the problem with maintaining the status quo is while you're trying to maintain the status quo, they become emboldened, and the world changes. There's no such thing as the status quo. The only constant in the world is change, right? And eventually, in January 2016, a few years after, just as I was wrapping up my Navy career, 2 U.S. Navy boats accidentally entered Iranian waters. And the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy seized these 10 American sailors. They were released a couple days later or a few hours later. But in the meantime, the IRGCN filmed them with their hands tied. And, it sent a message through the world. It was a pretty humiliating moment for the Navy and, frankly, for our country to have these sailors hogtied in the back of IRGCN boats. And that was a signal. And over time, these signals accumulated. Restraint avoided escalation at the moment, but it also taught Iran that probing, harassing, even seizing Americans carried little cost.
Yeah.
And that's the hidden piece of decades of restraint.
How did they interpret that?
Well, they became emboldened, and that's the part people miss. And so each incident taken alone looks manageable, right? But eventually they go farther and farther and farther. And so that logic finally broke in late 2019. And after months of Iranian provocation, there was a series of incidents. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq, they struck and killed some American bases, killed an American contractor, and then they overran the American embassy in Baghdad. And that's when President Trump finally said, we've had enough.
Yeah.
And that's when he killed Qasem Soleimani, who was the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force. He was he's kind of the General Patton of Iran.
Gotcha.
And they killed him at the Baghdad airport. We killed him at the Baghdad airport. That sent a message.
Yeah. So inaction had a cost then.
Yeah, inaction had a cost. It killed one of our contractors, and it ultimately ended up with kinetic action the other way.
Yeah.
So that's how you end up with more aggressive action, right? So when we talk about doing nothing today, we need to be honest about what that means down the line, right? Do we end up with stronger action?
Yeah.
Accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. And action doesn't pause the clock. It just lets someone else set the pace.
Okay. So zoom out for us.
Well, regionally, the Gulf states hedge. They don't, again, they're really big into status quo, right? Israel is compressing the timelines. They look at the missiles as an existential threat, and the proxies adapt. These are the Iranian proxies. Frankly, there's not much left of them anymore. Globally, China and Russia are watching. Mostly China. Russia's right now pretty well embedded in Ukraine.
Yeah.
But they're looking at precedent. They're asking, does repression buy time? Does nuclear latency deter enforcement? And frankly, does patience beat deterrence? Because that's what we're talking about here. How much patience are we going to have? This decision will be read less for what it does to Iran than for what it says about enforcement in this new multipolar world that exists.
Okay. So how does this cut through America first?
Well, America first has two instincts. The first is, I guess, realpolitik. And that's kind of defined by the Rubio and Trump era kind of side of America first. And that is what benefits America. Realpolitik America first says threats to America early, preserve freedom of action, and accept costs now to avoid larger wars later. And then there's the isolationist America first. And that's the kind of the Vance wing. Certainly it's the Tucker Carlson wing and that side. And it says no wars, no regime change, focus inward, put a big wall up against the border and ignore the rest of the world. And here's the tension. You cannot be America first and strategically indifferent to actions that actively target Americans. And that's kind of what we're talking about with a country like Iran, as much as some commentators would like to ignore that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mandate action, but it raises the bar for restraint.
Yeah. So at the end of this, do you see, is there a go or a no-go?
That's a good question, but it's not the analytic one. At the end of the day, the analytics can frame the burden. We can talk about the costs, but the decisions are made by the decision makers. And that kind of comes with the intel guy needs to stay in their swim lane.
Okay. Yep. Well, and that's where we are, right? So I think that there's still a lot of questions unanswered, but there is a lot happening behind the scenes. It sounds like you've got some inclinations or you've got some thoughts or ideas around that, but at this point, we're kind of sitting back and waiting, right?
Yeah, intel guys are notoriously opinionated, but it's probably good that we're not the decision makers.
Yeah,
because we got caught way too much in the gray areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm Howard. This is Evan. See you next time.